This is so beautiful. I think. Hi. Louder. All right. Woo. So, since you want loud, can we just have maybe 15 seconds of silence? To me, this right now, for lack of a better word, I haven't found one yet, but to me it's quite sacred that we're all here together doing this. It's an example that things are changing, and to me it's sacred. This is sacred space. This is meaningful engagement, and it warms my heart in lots of ways. So yeah, let's just have 10, 15 seconds for the people that are not here, the people that have come before us, and those to follow us. Cool. All right. Thank you. So, as Richard said, my name is Mike, and throughout my journeys, I ended up starting this thing a few years ago called Starts With Me. I didn't necessarily know at the time. I had an idea of what I wanted it to become, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I was still sorting out my own issues and trying to find a way in the world. But there was a messaging, basically, that I kept getting from peers, primarily, but also from a lot of the things I was reading, and I basically continued to do anything. It doesn't make a difference. The speaker, you mean? Is it too loud?
A little bit.
No? Yeah. Okay. That if I wasn't doing everything I possibly could to take care of myself, I would be in a place that I never want to be in ever again. And so I kept saying to myself, and it was drilled into my head, starts with you, Mike. You can do this, etc., etc. And so here I am a few years later. And throughout that journey, I've started to do a lot more stuff in the corporate world, which is actually kind of cool. But it's not this. And that's why I think this is so beautiful and meaningful, because we're all here for the same reason. And we all want the same thing. And I don't get to be in these spaces very often unless I'm in a peer support group or at a 12-step meeting or whatever it is. But that's still not the same. So yeah, I'm on a panel at St. Mike's, do some work with Schizophrenia Society, all these other places. Anyhow, the more that I make the meaning of my life to take care of myself, the more this stuff starts to happen. And I don't know, it's pretty miraculous in some sense. Do you have a question?
Exhibition place. Is that the CNE?
Yeah, the CNE. I spoke to 200 staff members there one day. Yeah, it's really cool. So I'm going to read this poem, and then I'm going to play this video, and then I'm going to tell you about my troubles. So, if you can start the day without caffeine or pep pills, if you can be cheerful, ignoring aches and pains, if you can resist complaining and boring people with your troubles, if you can understand when loved ones are too busy to give you time, if you can overlook when people take things out on you, when through no fault of yours something goes wrong, if you can take criticism and blame without resentment, if you can face the world without lies and deceit, if you can conquer if you can conquer tension without medical help, I've read this too many times. If you can relax without liquor, if you can sleep without the aid of drugs, then you are probably a dog. All right. It's so good. The first time I heard it, I was judging myself. I'm such a useless, horrible human being. It just helps remind me that we're human, and we're not perfect, and we're not supposed to be perfect. And if we can honor our bruises the same way we can honor our joys, I think it's helpful. I really think it's very helpful. And I'm in schools a ton. And especially in schools, there's such a deep resistance to facing the harsh realities of life. And it's not the kids, it's the teachers in the schools. And I think we need to honor that more. I really, really do. Okay, so let's play this video inside.
And I was like, yeah, right, man. Oh!
It's like you're not even trying to walk. Tried not having diarrhea?
You're killing me. You take meds for that? It looks really, really bad. Some people have it way worse than you do. Yeah, chill out.
So I guess you're not going out with us tonight.
I gotta go see my physical therapist. Therapy? Yeah. Whatever, weirdo. Can you hold on 1 second?
Honestly, your attitude sucks.
Yeah, I kinda have to. Have you ever thought about dropping the pharmaceuticals and fighting this the natural way? Like diabetes?
Enough is enough. It's a beautiful day, man. It's time to get up.
Dude, I just got eye surgery.
Yeah, like a week ago.
Well, it still hurts. No, he's fine.
Oh man, yeah, it's so good, huh? Wow. No matter how many times I watch it, it just continues to hit home, and I guess until it stops, for me, I'll keep playing it. And again, it just speaks to this whole...
Is that what our life supposed to be like?
I don't know. I don't know. I can't answer that, but...
You know it's a clip, right? So
What's that?
you sure know it's a clip, like, so most people are going to take it in, right?
I don't know. Perhaps, yeah. But yeah, I think it speaks to the way that, suffering is looked at in certain ways, Yeah. And I think it's helpful, at least it has been in my experience, outside of the times that are just too horrible to have any humor around, but just to have a little bit of lightness and a little bit of, around our rough moments, I think super duper helpful. Pardon me?
Did you try any one of those magical tricks?
No, I've tried everything else in the book though.
Okay.
Yeah, almost at least.
Magical tricks.
Okay, so this one's going to be quick, but we all know mental health, illness, etc. across the world, it doesn't really discriminate. So it's a human thing, it's a human condition. Certainly, depending on where you're from and what your life circumstance is, we can have different vulnerabilities and susceptibilities, and of course people in really horrible life circumstances might be more vulnerable. But if you're a human being, this is part of your experience. And I didn't really get it at all until I started to experience this. So around 12 years old, I wanted to be the smiley face, but I wasn't. and I didn't know why. So the gap between who I was and who I wanted to be is where my suffering started to blossom. And at 12 years old, I started looking around at my friends in grade 7, and I said, wow, you have something that I don't have. And it looks like you know how to feel comfortable at school, and you know how to talk to the teacher, and I don't know how to do that. And I don't know where to look, I don't know how to ask, I don't know anything. And I had an older brother, and usually when you have an older sibling, you get introduced to certain things before others may. And so I thought it was a great idea. I tried marijuana, didn't really work the first time. Then I thought it was a good idea to try magic mushrooms. So at 12 years old, I had a drug-induced psychotic episode on magic mushrooms, and it lasted a few days. It was probably the worst experience of my life. But what it did for me for the first time ever was it gave me a sense of control. So for the first time in my entire life, I felt that I could control how I felt. And by putting things into my body, that gave me that sense of control. And to me, addiction and etc., that's my definition. I don't feel good. I need to put something into my body to make the discomfort go away. And because I have no other solution, I hold on to that. And quite quickly, I went back to marijuana because I thought, geez, that was a little bit too much. But I need something like that. And I didn't know what else to do. And the marijuana worked perfectly at the time. And, by grade 8, I was high 24 hours a day from that point all the way till the day I stopped. And that, I made a justification, I can do this 24/7 and not die. That was my justification. I feel so horrible in my own skin. I don't know what to do, I don't know where to go. This is the only thing that I know. And I did lots of other drugs and I drank, but I knew if I did that to the same extent that I'd probably die. And that's another justification of somebody who probably has a problem. Maybe I need a different solution. And it took a really long time for me to get that, yeah.
Sometimes when you think of pain, the thing about pain is that the only thing about pain is that some pain you can get relief from, some other pains you can't, like bug bites, spider bites, snake bites. It all depends on how much pain it gives you.
It does, yeah. And pain, what's your name?
Jeremy.
Thank you, Jeremy. Pain, Jeremy is the name of I'll get to that in a little bit. Anyway, pain is different for everybody. He's the name of my best friend. My best friend's name is Jeremy. Pain is different for everybody. Okay, this is my experience. Hopefully you can relate in some ways, in other ways maybe not. But pain is different for everybody. And as I got older, that gap continued to grow. Whoa, wrong way. And in grade 11, wow. That's me at 12. In grade 11, I was convicted of trafficking marijuana. Yeah. And again, more problems. And what I started to do is I learned how to lie. I didn't know how to deal with my problems. I didn't know how to be honest, because being honest was so terrifying that I would have had to face reality, I guess. So I kept lying, and that became a big coping skill. And then I learned about my grandparents. So my paternal grandfather died by suicide, and my maternal grandfather lived with alcoholism. My mom had 7 sisters. And so it's kind of in my bones. And I managed to cheat and lie my way through high school. And shortly after that, my brother had his first psychotic episode and was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And that's sort of when he made this really amazing art project. I couldn't capture the whole thing with a camera, unfortunately. But anyhow, I started to become his main caregiver. So I'm a disaster. And because a lot of his symptoms made him not trust my parents, I was always the one who would go to the hospital to see him. Sometimes he'd be apprehended by the police. I'd have to go to the Don jail when it was still around, or I'd have to go to the courthouse at Young and College, and I'd have to do my best to communicate with him that it's probably helpful if he, at least when he's in jail, agree to go to the mental health courts so he doesn't have to be in jail, because it's not a good place for somebody in his condition. And so all these things are, just caving in on me, but yet I still can't say to myself, I'm a real mess and I need help. One of the things that I did, which I think is common, is I would look at him and say, well, he's worse than me. And that's an honest thing that I think we all do. We judge and we look at, and so that's what I was doing. I think I was doing it subconsciously for sure, but in retrospect, that's absolutely what I was doing. And so because somewhat on the outside I could hold it together, I just kept running away from my problems. There's this really amazing book called Wherever You Go, There You Are. So what I did was I'd hop on an airplane and go to South America and chase around a Colombian girl who I thought was going to save me. That didn't work, shockingly enough. And I just thought, if I just fix this, I'll be okay. If I just change that, I'll be okay. If I just, whatever excuse or reason I could find to hide from myself, I did it. And at the same time, I was living with my brother, and it was just a really unhealthy environment for both of us. Because I would be sitting there lecturing him about using drugs while I'm using drugs, and just the definition of dysfunction and chaos for me.
But why do drugs? Because drugs don't help you if you don't go to the right doctor
That's true.
prescripts.
Jeremy, can I ask you a question? Can we wait until after?
Yeah, what I think.
And then, but you're right. So in recovery, in one of the places where I've learned a lot of things, it's very clear. We are not doctors. We do not prescribe our own medication. So my brother and I are living in chaos. The one thing that started to change was that I could, whether it was in the hospital or wherever it was, when he was not well and didn't want to talk, we would just sit together, and then we started playing cards, and then we started playing poker, and then all of a sudden, fast forward 5 years, and I became one of the better online poker players in the world. It's hard to fathom how it all happened. Meanwhile, sort of taking care of him, and now I had more money, so I could afford to be high 24 hours a day, and then I could also pretend that I was okay. It's okay, I have money. My mommy told me to go to university and get a job and everything would be fine. So that was this illusion that I was living in. And slowly but surely that started to crash down with the help of the relationship of a girl that I started dating. And somehow we thought it was a good idea to get married. It's beautiful, and also another great example of how lost and cuckoo I was, or I felt. I really felt that way. Maybe there's lots of other words to describe it, but I don't have them. And so through this, I started to realize if I don't get help really soon, I'm in big trouble. So I had built up this pretend castle, or house of cards, they call it, right? And I was lying to her about how much I was getting high. And she comes from a family with similar issues, and I don't know whether she wanted to believe it or not, but I love this acronym, denial. Don't even notice I am lying. So I started to notice that I was lying, really notice. Oh my God, I am really just so messed up. You know those sand hourglass, those sand timer things? that was my life. And that's the thing about, for me, I think cannabis is, I fully support legislation. I think it's good. I think it's helpful. I don't think, for me it doesn't work. But that doesn't mean, I don't have anything against it. I think it's wonderful, and I think more of that is helpful for society. It opens up the conversation in some ways, right? People don't have to hide anymore. And that's part of this too, right? We don't have to hide what's happening inside of us. And I started to learn that, and I had suicidal thoughts and fantasies and all kinds of things throughout my life. But at this point, it was getting more serious. And it scared me to the, bless you, it scared me to the point of, I just can't do this anymore. And I knew, I had a friend who was an addiction counselor now, who I used to rave with a lot. I grew up in the heyday of the rave scene in Toronto. And he said, okay, let's meet up, and he brought his little clipboard from his treatment center. It's like, check, 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 check. Yeah, it looks like you have a problem, Mike. Thanks, Al, I said. But he said, call this number if you want help. So I called St. Joe's Hospital, I checked myself into an outpatient program, and the lady there said, Michael, you have to be sober for 72 hours before you come here. And I thought to myself, I can't be sober for 72 minutes. How the heck am I going to do that? Seriously, so I could have checked into a detox or whatever, but for whatever reason, it was the first time in my entire life that that sack of bricks that I'd been lugging around forever started to loosen. And so he gave me a big hug, and he looked me in the eye, and he said, it doesn't have to be like this anymore. And I broke down in tears, and that was the day it all started to change. We all want this, right? We all just want a hug, and we want to feel okay, and we want to, know that someone is there for us, so to speak. And I waved the white flag, and then I met Jeremy, my best friend, who's my best friend now.
Like Star Wars?
I wish. Yeah, I wish. I like to think of him as this because he has saved my life. So he became my sponsor in the 12-step programs, but he was my peer support person. He told me to call him every day, and I did, literally every day for the first 3 or 4 years. I'm not even kidding you, even if it was just to say hello. And that relationship saved my life. So speaking to the importance of peer support and having each other there at almost all times, or as much as we can be there for each other, is life-saving. Even just picking up the phone and saying hello. Sometimes I often overcomplicate it. It's not that complicated a lot of the time. And he's just held my hand, baby steps, baby steps, baby steps. And I got onto a waiting list for psychotherapy. It took almost 2 years. Then I got a psychiatrist. Then I got a marriage counselor. Then it was all covered by OHIP. I had to wait a long time, which is, again, something that this world of things can help with a lot. And then I got a mindfulness doctor. It's also covered by OHIP, which is pretty incredible. And I did anything I possibly could to take care of myself. And Jeremy told me, if you don't dig deep and build a strong foundation, when life kicks you in the face, you're not going to get back up very easily. And so I took that really seriously. I did anything to get and stay high 24 hours a day for 17, 18 years. I think the least I can do today is do anything I possibly can to take care of myself. And I do. I really take that more seriously than anything in my life. If you told me to get down on the floor and lick it, because it would help with my depression, I will do that. I'm not even kidding you. But I know that's not true, so don't tell me to do that. And this is I call them superhero squad of peer support and professional support. But yeah, without, I spend a lot of time in 12-step rooms. That doesn't, that's one example of peer support. And I spend a lot of time with other peers. And, professional help is helpful, but I think the real healing and the real freedom from the suffering comes from the human interaction that we get in these spaces. And that's been super true for me. And so I think, yeah, I got 2 kids now, it's crazy. It's actually 1 week away from 7 years of being clean. Yeah, it's crazy. Thanks, yeah. They always say, and I believe it, it's not a prize or a reward, it's just a reminder to be grateful. And I take that to heart. So I think these things right here are super important. And if we can learn these things, this is the one thing that I think where the peer support model can develop a little bit more is, and it's so tricky because of all the different interests, but this is one thing, these are spiritual principles that have been around for thousands of years. I learned them in AA, but I also learned them in mindfulness practices. I learned them in all the different wisdom traditions that I've been reading over the years. And I think they're incredibly important. Because where the suffering lies is in our soul, or in our spirit, or in our whatever you want to call it. That's my opinion. And so honesty, right? I need help. That's how it started for me. I need help. I can't do this alone. I'm a goddamn mess and I need help bad. And once I asked for help, I started to build hope and faith. Again, these are just words that represent meanings. So I had hope and I had faith. And through that process of Jeremy holding my hand, I was a 13-year-old kid in a 30-year-old man's body. It was a goddamn mess. Like I would drop a fork in the sink and it would go clang! And I would have a temper tantrum over that. And so through this process, I built courage to face myself and all the horrible things that I had done throughout my life. What I thought were horrible, right? Or all just the things that I had shame, guilt, remorse, all those things over. And then I became willing and got a little bit of humility to think, wow, I don't actually know the answers to all the things I thought I did. And I don't think I'm better than you and smarter than you and all the other things that kept me sick and in my own head, stewing in misery over why can't things be different so I can feel okay. Which is a really hard thing to reconcile, or at least it was for me. And then I started to learn to take sort of responsibility for my own care. And that's where I think the system struggles big time. We need to help people, mostly in the beginning, and that's where the help doesn't really exist. It's so backwards. Because without Jeremy and the peer support world, I would have never be here standing here today. And those are the people and the places that helped me in the beginning. But, without this, you go into the hospital and most often you're turned away, or you're waiting, or whatever it is. And then I practice, and then I give back. And giving back is the gift that I get from all the things that were given to me. Jeremy also told me once, if you don't give away what was freely given to you, you will lose it. And at first I didn't really get that. But now I do. And by giving back, it actually helps me too. It's a great win-win-win-win situation. And I still have miserable times, no doubt. But the last couple years, it's been a little bit more balanced. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about, there's this lovely quote, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. Lovely. So, brother, and how I learned a healthier way to relate to him.
Being positive has become a new form of moral correctness. In a survey I recently conducted with over 70,000 people, I found that a third of us, either judge ourselves for having so-called bad emotions, like sadness, anger, or even grief, or actively try to push aside these feelings. We do this not only to ourselves, but also to people we love, like our children. We may inadvertently shame them out of emotions seen as negative, jump to solution, and fail to help them to see these emotions as inherently valuable. Normal, natural emotions are now seen as good or bad. But when we push aside normal emotions to embrace false positivity, we lose our capacity to develop skills to deal with the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. I've had hundreds of people tell me what they don't want to feel. They say things like, I don't want to try because I don't want to feel disappointed. Or, I just want this feeling to go away. I understand, I say to them, but you have dead people's goals. Only dead people never get unwanted or inconvenienced by their feelings. Only dead people never get stressed, never get broken hearts, never experience the disappointment that comes with failure. Tough emotions are part of our contract with life. You don't get to have a meaningful career or raise a family or leave the world a better place without stress and discomfort. Discomfort is the price of admission to a meaningful life.
So there's this wonderful saying, discomfort resilience. Pema Chodron, who's a Buddhist nun, that's who I heard it from. And then Full Catastrophe Living is another book by the same author that's been really meaningful to me. But this idea of discomfort resilience. So as the lady in the video said, bad emotions are part of life and we can't avoid them. And the more we try to avoid them, the more they haunt us. And when my brother first got sick, because I was still really a mess, I was so lost in this interaction. Like, I'm supposed to take care of my older brother, but I am such a mess, I need help too. And what I see happening in families a lot is it's that boundary between, our family member needs our help or our friend, and we know we can help them. But when we get in that entanglement, sometimes it just makes things worse for both people. And we don't have time to dig it all into all of it. And it's part of being a human. We're wired to help each other. And so when I would sometimes, when he would be really not well, and we were trying to help him get on the pathway to recovery, or to, I don't know what else you would call it, there was so much tension there. Because instead of allowing him to be who he was, my mom, my dad, me, whoever, we wanted him to be who we needed him to be so we could feel better. And again, self-criticism and blame and shame is not helpful either. So it's so layered and tricky, but looking back, we weren't truly looking out for his best interests. We were looking out for our own. And again, subconsciously, right? We weren't purposely being, manipulative or whatever it was, but we didn't know what the hell to do. Even today, there's some really promising stuff around psychosis and CBT, yeah, and but there's no psychotherapy whatsoever for my brother. There's no help outside of his medication and peer support. And it's mind-blowing to me how that is possible. So, part of the stuff I do in the schools is that we create curriculums that teach some of this stuff that are embedded into their lesson plans. So in grade 11 psychology, we've got a lesson plan in there that helps people understand this stuff better. And we're trying to get it into all the lower grades because it is incredibly helpful. But anyhow, so I'm trying to manipulate my brother, my parents are trying to, manipulate him, and it was just such a mess, And it's so difficult because the system doesn't know what to do either. And so sometimes, at least now, it's been really helpful for me to kind of remember life is messy, it's also lovely, but I have to have the assumption, and it's wrong sometimes, most people, most of the time, have good intentions. And so I was the lady from the Lynn up here, and I wish I was here earlier, but sort of the people in the system level, they seem to be trying the best they can. They just don't know the answers. And I don't think we always have the answers either. And it's just tricky as hell. But I didn't get that. And so for so long, I just wanted things to be different. They needed to be different. I just didn't have a little bit of space between what I thought needed to happen, what was happening, and what I could do about it. And so that's been a big part of my journey. And luckily, it was right around the time that I was getting sober too. My brother got into Ontario Shores. So he literally spent 10 years. Hospital, home, street, jail, hospital, home, street, jail. That was the pattern. And somehow he got into Ontario Shores. Do you guys know that in Whitby? It's a long-term.
Okay, that answered my question.
Yeah, and it's a pretty nice place. And it was really helpful for him. He was there for 6 months. And so since that time, he's a part of a lot of this stuff too. And sort of the clouds have parted a little bit. Life's not perfect. But at least the interactions with him are a lot better. And how I really started to get better at it, and we're getting to the end, is I started to really learn the difference between thinking and feeling. So when I would be trying to interact with my brother, I would say things like, I feel that if you just did this, I would feel better. Or I feel that you're not taking your well-being seriously enough. And that's a thought, right? That's not a feeling. I think that if he took care of himself, it would be good for him. And also selfishly good for me. And again, that's a fine line, right? He's my brother. I love him to death. I've been through the most ridiculous things that I'm sure a lot of us know about. And so I don't feel he needs to get better. I think that. And I feel scared. And I feel sad. And I feel angry. And I feel frustrated. And I feel lost. And all these things are going on. And when I can separate those two things, right? I feel the world is not fair. I feel the healthcare system sucks.
Yep.
Right? Yeah, I don't feel that. I think that. And I feel scared. And anyway, that's another whole hour conversation, but it's a really helpful thing to separate. When we can start identifying our thoughts as thoughts and our feelings as feelings, it kind of makes a little bit more space. And then I could communicate better with my brother. I think this, I feel this. And it just sort of untangles that obsession with making him do what I think he needs to do. So I can feel better, Anyway, I'm not really so much like that anymore, but it's part of us, it's part of me. And the last thing,